Let's ask artificial intelligence a question that relates to dog culture. So today we're just looking at my computer screen here. And so I asked the chat, does being around animals create a speech problem with humans? So this is what I asked. Now I'm already aware of the answer of this. The Kellogg experiment demonstrates this, and the answer is definitely yes. Also, just a simple fact that animals don't have the brain parts that humans have. So you cannot be in a speech rich environment when you're just around dogs or chimpanzees or other things. So I just wanted to show you this because this is how we have to interact with our society because we're in a dog loving, dog worshiping society. So the chat says there's no evidence to suggest that. Well, what chat is doing right here is saying there's no evidence that it wants to share with you right now. It's kind of like talking to a dog owner. They deny all the problems that could go along with their dogs, but then if you look at their Facebook page, they're exploiting those problems to make themselves look like heroes. For example, they will say like, "Well, my dog doesn't smell bad," but then you might notice that they're constantly talking about all of the smelly good things they buy for their dog bed, stuff like that. So so the chat says no, there's no evidence. So I asked the chat, what about the Kellogg experiment? So the chat just basically gave me a summary of the Kellogg experiment, but they really didn't answer my question. They just gave me a quick summary of it. So I reminded the chat that there is evidence of the speech problems because the speech problems in communication are briefly mentioned right there. So, but then chat doubles down. Check it out. They say, nope, it doesn't provide evidence to being around animals. But yet it does provide evidence. Being around animals did not create the type of environment that that little kid needed. So they go back to talking about the chimp, Gua. So it was Gua, the chimp, in the environment. However, the chimp did not become human. Instead, the human became more chimp like. And again, it doubles down and says it does not support the idea that being around non speaking animals. So the thing is basically doubling down. It's telling me that I'm wrong. So I had to remind the chat AI that the human developed speech problems. So chat AI is getting all of this information basically from the dog worshipping internet. It's just going to do a quick search around the internet and basically promote human interaction with animals instead of getting down to the truth. So there I did it. I reminded them that there were speech problems in the Kellogg experiment. So now chat is starting to open up a little bit, and they're going to say, well, the focus was on the chimp. And they're saying the focus was not on Donald. So that's fine, but just because the experiment was not about observing the human, instead it was about observing the chimp, that does not mean that it didn't prove something. So do you see what chat AI did here? The purpose of the purpose of the experiment was to see if an animal could become like a human. So even though it made the human have speech problems, they're ignoring those speech problems because the experiment wasn't labeled as being towards humans. So even though there was a speech problem in the experiment, chat AI is saying that doesn't mean anything because the experiment was not published to see if there were speech problems. As we see right here, if you read this part, um, they were not there to assess any negative impact on Donald's speech development. Well, that doesn't matter. Just because the experiment wasn't set up to see if that was a problem, the experiment illustrated that anyways. So chat AI is ignoring the human detriment that happened in the experiment in order to promote being around animals. So it's very interesting. So I decided to go another route with this, and I asked the chat, does having a language rich environment, is that important for speech? So okay, now they're going to admit it. Okay, they're going to admit that we need a language rich environment. And so instead of talking about the experiment, now I'm going to ask chat, so an environment with creatures that cannot speak would not be good? Aha. Still, they're going to try to double down a little bit. An environment with non speaking animals does not inherently prevent language development, but it may lack. Okay, so you see how we have to interact with the dog lovers and the dog loving society? We have to be smarter than them. Like, we can't just call them stupid, we can't just call them idiots, because that simply isn't going to work. So, now I'm going to remind the chat that only human language rich environments are the ones that help humans. Because something you'll notice is chat keeps bringing animals back in. Like right here, chat says balancing interactions with humans and animals. So they're still trying to say that you got to be around animals too. Let me scroll back up for just a second. Notice how chat opened up the conversation. They tried to say that being around animals is going to give you some type of therapeutic thing. And they say may. So that probably some information they pulled off of a dog-loving source. Let's go back to our conversation here. So finally, after I asked Chat AI about this, I also mentioned rudimentary animal grunts like Gua would make do not meet the language requirements. So Gua is the chimp in that experiment. And so finally, Chat AI, after I told it what was true, it finally admits, you are correct. Human language rich environments are essential for optimum speech and language development in children. Human language is complex. Grammar, vocabulary, and the ability to convey abstract concepts which are not present in the vocalization of non-human animals. Boom, there you go. So this right here, you should read this. This is very interesting. If you're curious about why all these kids right now are having speech problems, if you're curious about how dog owners don't have a good vocabulary when you talk to them, they kind of grunt and bark and cry and whine a lot like their dogs. Yeah, it's important to be around a language-rich environment. Effective language development, children develop most from environments where they can hear and participate in meaningful conversations, receive diverse vocabulary exposure, and engage in social interactions with other humans. Boom. So Chat AI kind of even basically told the truth at the end, even though in the beginning the Chat AI wasn't able to tell the truth because I didn't ask it the right questions. So I wasn't really coaxing AI to say something that's not true. I was getting AI to stop focusing on promoting animals in their speech. And when I adjusted the questions and got a little bit smarter, finally AI was able to admit the truth. So that's just a little interesting one I want to share with you guys. This illustrates a few things. It illustrates the Kellogg experiment and how bad that was. It illustrates, that being around these non-speaking animals, they do not fulfill the linguistic requirements, and thus a language-rich requirement is crucial for fostering speech and language skills. So we've proved this with Gua in the Kellogg experiment. We're proving this right now by putting people around dogs and noticing that their speech just goes meow because we're not giving them a language-rich environment. And if you want to discover all this stuff, this little exercise I'm showing you, this is how you have to behave with dog owners, the internet, and everything else. Like, for example, say like a single mom with a couple kids living paycheck to paycheck went to like a animal rescue place or something. Would they tell her any of this? Would they tell her, hey, you shouldn't get those 2 Great Danes because they're expensive and because all of this is true and that can mess with the speech of your young children? No, they won't tell a single mom that. And so that's why we have to take care of each other, and we have to do this type of work and get the information out there, because our society and our internet and our chat AI and everything else, they're just going to lie to us. So we got to be smarter. And see you guys later. Hope you like this one.